Would you like it? I could put it on the page right now.
Perfect. Just with the online sessions, the webinar one for both HPSP and for PTPE.
Got it. Okay, we are live. You are good to go.
Hi, Merit. There, great. Awesome.
Hi,
okay.
Hi, Merit.
Okay.
Nice. Hi, everyone, and welcome to students. I see that we've got 18 participants at the moment, so I'm just going to give it a few minutes. In the meanwhile, if you are here, then please go onto your chat and just announce hello, welcome, anything, just so that we know you're there so we can greet you. Our webinar sessions work as webinars, not as Zoom meetings, so we won't be able to see you there or hear you. So please do use the chat and the Q&A forum throughout the webinar so we can engage with you, and feel free to do that. All right, so hi. Hi, Gabriella. Hi, Shan. Hi, Amara. Hi, Andre. Welcome. Vikile. Wonderful, wonderful to see all these new names and new students here. And some old names. Hi, Warwick. Welcome again to some of our students who are now in their second year. Welcome. Hi, Mark. Okay. For those students who are on, I see that some are struggling to connect. So if you are in touch with your colleagues, the link is on the invite that was WhatsApped, and it's on the Canvas pages for HPSP on online sessions and PTPE online sessions. So direct them to there if they're struggling. Hi, Nicole, no problem. Now you know how to use the Q&A as well as the chat. Wonderful. Learned 2 things in one go. Okay. Oh, I see some staff members. Hello, Kirili and Kumari. Welcome. Nice to see you guys joining us.
Okay, so the links to the YouTube stream are on the pages where I did a sync by sending out a notification. So any students that may not know where to find the link to join the webinar or see it on YouTube, they'll have an email for that now.
Okay, perfect. So lots of ways to get connected. Thank Nasrin, appreciate that. Like, can't be all students are having issues because 20 of you are here without issues. So I'll wait a little bit longer, but I'm not sure what issues they're having. Then Darren, are you keeping an eye on the YouTube in case there's any questions or things posted up there?
Will do.
Okay, perfect. In case they were kicked out. Okay, they can try again. Tell them to persevere and try again if they got kicked out the first time.
If you could forward the link I just put in, that'll definitely get them directly into this session.
Perfect. I'm going to stick that on the WhatsApp group as well. Mark, tell them to just, it's all good. Just tell them to, we're waiting, and they will find the link. They mustn't panic. We expect this on our very first webinar. They will get the hang of it. So just tell them it's coming. The link has been sent to them. You can try again. Hello, wow, so the numbers are just jumped, 46. Okay, so welcome to all the new students who've just gone through. Sorry about the stress. Please do go to the little chat box at the bottom and just tell us that you're here and say hello, or I'm here. As this is a webinar, we can't actually see you there. So it'll be nice to see who's here and that you are present and with us. I know it was stressful getting on board, so yeah, you are, so let us know that you are here. Hello, there we go, Primrose and Courtney, lovely, and Otanda, welcome, and Christina, yay, you made it, Hannah. Oh, lots of you, right, Melissa and Mariam, welcome, and Carmen and Tyra and Taryn. Lovely, lovely to see all of you here. Welcome. There you go. Now you can all breathe. All right, so I think now that most people are here, you're getting the hang of this. So welcome to the our very first Bed Honors webinar. As part of the program, we believe that knowledge comes in multiple forms, not just in textbooks. And we would like to foster teachers who are critical thinkers and agents of change. And so one of the big aspects of our program is to try and expose our students to as many different forms of knowledge and perspectives. And we believe that, that engaging in critical discussion and dialogue with multiple stakeholders is really a wonderful opportunity for all of you to start to develop your own philosophies and your own ideas about the things that we are teaching you in the module. And it's not just about the content, and it's not just about what Lauren and I and the textbooks say, but it's really about what is the ongoing dialogue in the field of education, and more specifically in the field of inclusive education. And so I really encourage you all to take these opportunities throughout the year. We have a webinar every month. Each one has a different theme, and we bring different speakers, and we really try to bring into the space really knowledgeable, amazing scholars, academics from other universities, teachers and principals from schools, and various other stakeholders in education, so that we bring in all these different important voices and perspectives. And this is really your opportunity as students to engage in those conversations. So this is not about sitting back and just listening and taking notes, but this is also about networking. These are people throughout the year that are going to be in your field, and you want to create relationships and connections. So please do engage with the conversation. These webinars are quite informal. We try and have discussions rather than presentations. And so there are many ways to get involved. One is obviously the chat box that you've just been very busy with. Throughout the conversation, if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you really like something, please feel free to engage with us in that chat box. We are keeping our eyes open on that, and Nareshni is also in the audience there, and she's also keeping an eye on that for us. And so every now and again, we'll just sort of disrupt the conversation a little bit to engage with some of those questions. If you are quite shell-shocked and not quite comfortable with doing that, or you got a really long question that you want to ask or comment, then the second option is, if you look at the bottom, there's a little Q&A with some comment bubbles. You're welcome to go there and post your question, and we will also be checking on that. If any of you are watching this live on the YouTube stream, then you can also put a comment there, and Darren, who's in the background as well, will keep an eye out and let us know if you're having anything that you're wanting answered or any comments that you want to make. And the third option is, I think you do have access to the emoticon. So, you know, if you want to have any reactions, you don't really have anything to say, but you're really happy about what you're hearing, or you're really sad about what you're hearing, or you're in absolute aghast and shock, then in your chat forum, you can also just post an emoticon. It's just nice to know that you're there, and it's nice to know that you're listening. So please do engage with us. And so before we start the conversation, I just want to remind students, as this is your first webinar, the webinars do form part of learning content for HPSP 801, PTPE 801 as well, which means that in both of those modules, you'll be using the discussion here to base your essays, your reflective essays on, which are graded. So you don't need to take down copious notes. Remember, we're not asking you to memorize the conversations. We're asking you to engage with the ideas that are being presented. And we want you to take some value opinions and perspectives here. What do you agree with? What do you not agree with? What is new and exciting? What has been introduced to you that you maybe don't know anything about? What has been said today that you're going, yeah, I know that, I know that. So that's the responses. That's the kind of engagement we're looking for. So welcome to all the students, welcome to the staff members, and welcome to our guest speakers. I'm going to pass the banner on to Lauren, but she's disappeared. So I'm just rambling on until she appears again. And so, right, so to our speakers, thank you so much for joining our Beard Honors family again. We are so pleased to have you. We always learn so much. And looking forward to this conversation, and to our students, please start engaging, and I look forward to this engagement. So Lauren is facilitating the session, and I move things on to you. Thank you, Lauren. You're on mute. I can't hear you. Sorry. I probably know exactly what you're saying, but still you're on mute. Are you not able to unmute yourself? Okay, Darren, can you unmute her? Nothing? Okay, you talk and I'll read your sign language lips there. I'm sure Darren is frantic in the background. Any assistance there? I'll just ramble on in the meanwhile. While Lauren is figuring the unmute process, I want to welcome our two speakers.
I'm fine. I'm finally unmuted. Sorry, people. And at the same time, I must apologize. You saw me flying off the screen. My plug decided that it wanted to eject itself from the things. I had to quickly do a contortion work here to get it going. So apologies, students, but that's what it's all about. So let's begin.
No problem.
And I'd like to just welcome the two panelists today and just give you a tiny little bit of background as to where both panelists come from and their experience. I've had the privilege and honor of knowing both panelists, so it's been awesome. I've worked with them in different ways. Merritt Watson, I've probably known, it's probably about, we don't want to give away our age here, Merritt, but it's probably over 30 years. Stacey, I've known for about 8 to 10 years, and both panelists today come with a wealth of experience. And as Avi mentioned in the beginning, we need to also take cognizance of how complex inclusive education is, how difficult the field is, and how, when we describe inclusion, like we did in our live session, the most important thing to remember is that inclusion means different things to different people. So what I want you to take from the conversation today and from the experiences that Merit and Stacey share with us is that inclusion is context specific. What may work in Merit's school may not work in Stacey's school, etc. And also remember, we spoke about this in our live session, that ideal where Ainscow and Slee and Spangerdow and all the scholars in the field from the global north keep saying every child must be educated in the same school. We shouldn't have the distinction like we have in South Africa of special schools as resource centers, full service schools and ordinary schools. But we know that with the practicalities, and that's what Stacey and Merit, I've asked them to share with us today, you'll see that there are some cases where we might land up with inclusion by default, where we're actually excluding the child to include. And these are the things we have to think of. So before I let them kick off, I just want you to repeat this keep this in mind as we go through the webinar today. Excluded from and within schools. I want you to think about that notion. What does that mean if we say excluded from and within schools? And then the other thing also, every child matters and matters equally. And let's see what our panelists have to say now in terms of how they mediate this process of inclusion. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to kick us off with a question and ask each panelist, and please just do this as a dialogue and a conversation. Luckily enough, also, Stacey and Merit know one another, so they are comfortable and they've chatted and they are aware of each other's context. I want you to tell me and our panelists and our students today, how would you define inclusive education? So let's kick off with that. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, Laura, thank you for the invitation and thank you to your university and your students. It's a great privilege to share with you. Okay, so what is inclusion? Inclusion for me, and has been over the last umpteen years of teaching, is what we as a school are able to put into place to assist that individual child to be the best that they can possibly be. And that's a huge statement. I'm not considering that the child has to be of a certain IQ or of a certain color, race, or creed. I'm just saying, what is the school able to offer? As a school, are you able to put the necessary support in place to ensure that that child has an opportunity to learn? And my ideal is, if that answer is no, that we don't have the infrastructure to have wheelchairs, we don't have the infrastructure in terms of teacher assistants in our classrooms to enable that child to be the best version of themselves, then for me, that's not inclusion. We're not setting that child up to be the best version of who they can be and who they wish to be, and for helping them to reach their potential. Okay, it's a default, in my opinion, from the school side, that we are not able to offer the support that that child rightly deserves. So that's how we at my school look at inclusion. We will take children who are differently able, because we believe that every single child has strengths. Every single child has the ability to learn, but as a school, are we able to meet that child's needs in every one of those aspects to ensure that they succeed? And it's based on that ideal and that philosophy that we take children in and try and work with them as best we can to help them and empower them to work to their best potential, whatever that might be. Stace.
So thank you, Merit. I definitely concur with what you're saying. It's difficult to follow that, but I'll try and add in some points coming from my context as well. So just to give you a bit of background, I'm a teacher at Glen Oaks Remedial and Special Needs School. So like what Merit was saying, we are a school where we celebrate a child's strengths and then we accommodate them in terms of their learning difficulties. So we provide those measures. We provide a nurturing space also where each child is noticed, they feel happy, they feel safe, and they feel secure. Like Merit was saying, they are differently abled. Some of the children are on the autistic spectrum, some are dyslexic, some have behavioral problems, some have learning difficulties and anxiety problems. So what we do at our school is we provide that space where a child is able to learn to the best of their ability within a holistic framework. So we also have occupational therapists on site, we have speech therapists on site, we have remedial therapists on site, and we also have educational psychologists on site as well. So there we're working collaboratively within a holistic framework with all these different professionals where they will come into our class, they will provide a different framework on how to run a certain lesson. They will provide us with some ideas, with some, support strategies, differentiated strategies on how to help a child. So we also work collaboratively with other professionals in the same educational space that we can look at a child holistically, and we are then able to provide a program that best supports their ability.
We too, Stace, work with a support team, a multidisciplinary team, and that's also what we offer. And within our primary schools perspective, more than in the high school perspective, these professionals offer the teachers professional development and training sessions to implement in their classrooms. So it's a little bit different to the way you sort of do it. Yes, in the primary school, we do some pull out, but a lot of our children, for example, do group OT where the whole class goes together, the class teacher goes with them, they sit and they watch, and that skill that's given in OT or whatever is then practiced for the rest of the week in the classroom, whether the child needs it or not, it just benefits them. But this is particularly at the foundation or at the really beginning, where we try to give the children as many skills as we possibly can. So our professionals don't only see the children on a one-on-one, but they also do a significant amount of in-service training, particularly in the primary school. And then right through the entire college, grade 0 to 12, we have various speakers coming on a termly basis. In fact, one of your staff members are now doing talks on ASD and helping our high school staff and our primary school staff in dealing with children with classroom strategies in that perspective. So it's definitely, again, very similar to you in terms of a multidisciplinary approach. Absolutely.
Right, so thank you for that. I see we've got some very nice comments in the chat, which we'll come to as well. But I think Stacey and Merit, what you've also really highlighted is the whole notion of collaboration. And, collaboration is the cornerstone of inclusion. We cannot, as just teachers being in a classroom, be the be all and end all in order to support that child. We need, the various stakeholders to come in. We need the experts. So I think a lot of people have the misconception. They think that inclusive education is the teacher is at the center. There's no doubt about it. However, that teacher often needs support as well. And this is something that's come up in a lot of the research as well, that teachers often feel that moving towards a more inclusive way of working and an inclusive way of developing strategies in a classroom is a burden on an already overburdened system. And if we go to our South African context, we see that because of all the contextual reality. So before I look at the chat, because I think it's lovely that our students are also engaging, we do want to bring that in. But just before, because I think just to link onto this, I want you to just share, if you can, one or two critical incidents where inclusion worked for you, maybe, where, you really worked with, individuals or a child or a group and they got things done. And also, I want you to give the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we'll look at areas also where there were the constraints, where things happen, because as we've said, often we include to exclude, and sometimes we include somebody and then it has a domino effect on the rest of the context and the rest of the environment. So if we think of the Thousand and Villa quote where he says, inclusion is like a recipe. Once you think you've got all the ingredients, a kid arrives that is allergic to those ingredients. And I think that's something that we need to consider. That's a process and it's always shifting. So whoever wants to go first, and then I'll also, as you're doing that, I'll run down the chat and we can make some links so we get our students involved as well. So thanks.
Lauren, please may I ask you to repeat that quote, because I'd love to follow it with a beautiful example.
Okay, it was Thousand and Villa, and I think it was in the 1980s or 90s, okay, when the very first cohort of inclusive education scholars were out there, and they said that inclusive education is like a recipe. Once you think you have all the ingredients, a child knocks on your door that is allergic to one of those ingredients. And I think that analogy just puts it all together and puts it in place.
And not a true word spoken. Some years ago, we had a child enroll at the school in grade 0. At that time, we were just aware of the fact that he'd been diagnosed with muscle dystrophy, a specific type of muscle dystrophy. So we do know it's a degenerative disease of the muscles, and as years progress and as the child progresses, so they become less and less physically able to help themselves in that kind of regard. Anyway, at the time when the parents enrolled the child, it was about, let's go one step at a time, let's just see what we can do, and we'll make it up as we go along. So being the gullible person I am, and because I believe very strongly that every child is unique and every child has the potential to succeed, we embarked on this journey together. Grade 0 and 1 were fine. Grade 2, we started with the little guy coming in with crutches because he was struggling to walk. Grade 3, we got to a position where he was requiring a wheelchair and assistance in order to move from A to B. He was still able to help himself in the bathrooms independently because we don't have teacher's aid at my school. So he still needs to be independent, but we couldn't kind of keep him on the ground root level of ground floor where we were able to manage the wheelchair story. It became a significant issue towards the end of grade 3, where our computer room is in a double story. There is no lift facilities because we are residential houses that have been converted. And then it became a debate as to how do we carry this child up these stairs, that should a teacher fall, should the teacher fall with the child in, and then it opened another whole dimension around which of the staff are prepared to take the risk, which of the staff are not prepared to take the risk. It became another debate, and it wasn't about being ugly to the child. It's a genuine concern. What are the parents going to do if a teacher trips up the stairs and there goes the child, and the child then lands up with further significant impairment due to his already compromised physical state of health. So that was a debate that went through, and eventually the parents then employed a facilitator or assistant that then opted to carry the young man up the stairs. We got to grade 4, all going well. His learning programs were mediated just to help him cope with the written output. His assistant helped him to write. He did a lot of his answers and things verbally. So all those accommodations were put into place so that learning could continue. Mom and Dad then arrived with a very, very curveball. Now they said they didn't any longer want to have the human assistant. They needed to have a dog assistant. I love animals. So of course, no problem. That sounds wonderful. How do we work with this? All this kind of thing. And the attorney to our board put the brakes on and said, hang on, you haven't thought this process through. So I said, what do you mean? This is what the parents are opting, because at night the child needs to have the dog sleeping on his bed, or right next to him. So should his breathing stop, should he falter, should whatever, the dog is able to run and wake them. It's a highly skilled and trained dog. This is how the scenario goes. So if the child drops his pencil in the classroom or drops an eraser, the dog will pick it up and give it back to him. And this is how it goes. I said, so what is the problem? Unbeknown to me, and not thinking past the edge of my nose, was, what about the classroom of children who, A, maybe of different culture or whatever, and are not comfortable with pets or animals being in their direct space? Okay. Number two, what about a child who has had a traumatic experience involving a dog in their younger years and has an absolute fear of animals in the classroom? Number three, what about a child who possibly has an allergic reaction to fur and the animals in the classroom? Number four, what if you've got a boisterous child who's energetic and energized and trips over the dog and steps on its tail accidentally and hurts the dog? It's an animal. What if that dog should be hurt so badly that it retaliates, bites, barks? What then? Number five, the dog needs to go to the bathroom or to the toilet. The child has muscle dystrophy. He cannot help himself. Who's going to pick up the dog poo? The parents assure me that the dog will poo prior to coming to school or after school. We kind of all function on our own way, and we all know that when nature calls, nature calls. This then created another entire dynamic that I had not even thought of, in terms of including a child, and then the parents, what our inclusion was working with other people, facilitators, human beings, whatever. Never once did it cross our minds that the child like this could actually and would benefit from having the support of a, what do you call it, a guide dog, a support dog, service dog, in that kind of way. So this dynamic created another dynamic that was, yeah, I just wanted to bury my head in the sand and play ostrich, because it then meant that the parents of the entire class and school had to be surveyed. Okay, not just the class itself where the dog was, but the entire school, because if the dog was out of break and, children are children, they run, fall over the dog bites, whatever, it's a service dog, we know it's trained, but you never know. It became a dynamic that the whole school had to be engaged in being surveyed as to whether they agree or disagree. All right, so now the child's difference, and where we say the child is differently able, parents were seeing it as a difference and a deficit. The medical model, it's a lack of, instead of seeing that it's a point of trying to empower. But at the same time, we also had to be cognizant of other children in their class that may have encountered many of all, or maybe one or two of these matters. So to cut a long story short, the parents hummed and hawed. It wasn't a unanimous decision. There was lots of debate, and the board and I and the staff took a decision that we would give it a trial run for a year with very specific structures in place that we had to come up with, where the dog would lie in the classroom, where the child's desk would be. Now already we're starting to single that child out, because it's no longer inclusion, he's no longer a part of the class, he's no longer a part of his group. He has to sit away from the other children because of the dog may be, the dog could do, the dog, all these what ifs, maybe, whatever. Yeah, and that's how it unfolded for the year. At the end of the year, we had to revisit the entire process again, take a vote to the next thing. And this time around, because the young little boy couldn't go up to the next class, which was upstairs, we kind of had him downstairs with the existing class, but carried on with his individual learning program, then again excluding him on another ground. So it was another group of children. And in this particular class, the parents voted absolutely no. We had children with major fear of animals, etc., etc. Where do you draw the line? How do you draw the line? You're including, but you're excluding. So you're including one, you're excluding the other. what is the right answer? I don't know. The parents took the child out of the school and then decided to homeschool him because they felt that may have been better, which was a better safety option for others, but deprived him of the social element. Guys, I don't know. There's no answer.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Merit. Stacey, do you want to share an experience?
Yeah, I've got many to share. I've got to pick and choose. But I'll go off what Merit was saying. And I'll start with a quote, Lauren, as well, because this was a quote that another colleague had told me about, and we actually presented a lecture yesterday to foundation phase students going out for their prac. And the quote is, diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. And it's both for the learners and for the teachers, because as much as we are inviting them to the party and we're inviting them and we're including them, us as teachers also need to dance very lightly with what Merit was saying. You know, we looking to include, but then like in my school, we're providing facilitators. So we're providing teacher assistants in the classroom. Like I know in my classroom, a little boy needs a facilitator, a one-on-one facilitator. He is shared between two other boys, so he's not with me all the time. But then you're kind of targeting, you're putting, you know, a big banner, a big red dot on this child to say, you know, he needs help. But that's what it is. Do we leave him to struggle, or do we provide him with that facilitator who is there to prompt and support and aid? So as much as we are inviting the children to dance in our classroom and we are providing those different opportunities to allow them to learn and enjoy learning and be included, we also need to kind of play a very balanced dance ourselves, because we need to be mindful of not including to exclude or excluding to include. So Merit, I definitely agree with what you're saying. Just in my context as well, what we look to do is we also have a different stream. So we have a remedial stream where the children in that stream still have an academic potential. So we have from grade 1 to grade 7, where they still go on their academic trajectory. So we implement as many skills as we can according to the CAPS curriculum. Of course, we have watered it down to be our core skills. So we look at those core skills. Then we also have another stream called the goal stream and the vocational stream. And what that stream is about is those children are not so academically capable. So it's more entrepreneurial skills, functional skills, vocational skills. Where we have a high school, it's not your normal high school, it's a vocational high school where they do things like hospitality, gardening, housekeeping, all of those kinds of skills. So when they leave the academy in year 5 at the age of 18 or 19, they leave with work employment. So as a school, we try and we have that balanced dance where we try and we provide those academic opportunities to children in that academic space who are still able to learn a curriculum with some concessions, with some aids. And then we also have another stream, like I said, the vocational stream, where we provide more functional skills to them. However, we do have those cases, like Merit was saying, where we are thrown a total curveball, where we think we've provided every opportunity and everything that can go wrong, and we have facilitators and we have teacher aides. And then we get a child who has such behavioral problems that no matter how much we try and accommodate them with the use of time breaks and punching bags and therapies that they can go out and speak to an educational psychologist, we still have that child in our classroom who is totally disruptive. They are impulsive. They don't allow you to teach. They don't allow others to learn. I mean, I have been bitten. I have been, pushed. I have been, everything that you can, imagine. And still, you've got to try and be mindful that they come with certain difficulties. And how much can you provide that support? How much can you accommodate them to make them feel as included as you can? How do you make them feel so safe in a space where they heard, they noticed, that they feel in a space that they can learn? And sometimes we don't get it right. Sometimes they have to go through the discipline policy, because out there in the big bad world, nobody is going to say, oh, shame, you have a behavioral difficulty. Oh, shame, you have a learning difficulty. You need to kind of conform sometimes. You need to kind of listen to the rules, follow the rules, because there are going to be consequences. So we have to, as much as we're trying to create that nurturing space, we also have to provide a reality. These are the rules. You have to conform to these rules because there are consequences. So we're also providing as much functional skills, as much as life skills as we can. We also have concessions as well. So when children are writing exams from grade 4 to grade 7, we also have concessions like a scribe, a prompt, a spelling concession, a maths exemption, extra time, and so on. Because again, we are trying to make those exam and testing situations as safe, as comfortable, and we are trying to provide the availability to children that they can succeed in every learning opportunity we provide them. But like Merit's saying, it's a tough balance. You have to dance that dance very carefully and be mindful all the time.
Thank you for that feedback. And I've just been looking at the chat, and it's very interesting to see how many of our students have also mentioned the attitudes of teachers that has come up, supporting teachers, dealing with learners who are seen as different, because we have to acknowledge that there is difference in our world. No matter where we go, no matter who we meet, we're always going to have that difference. However, it's how we mediate that difference. Sometimes that can be a problem. And quite interesting to see some of the students have picked up lovely things like, how do you accommodate a disruptive child? How do you accommodate, and in fact, one of the students, I think it may have been Tara, I think, said that in her school, they have a teacher using a wheelchair, and that teacher is carried up the stairs. Now, that is against occupational safety, health and safety hazards. So I want to just, before you give me some hopes, I want to move into something. And then Taryn, yes, I see you have a question. Oh, yes, thank you, Avi, for putting that there. She can give it to us so we can also deal with that. Let's just think about the whole notion of inclusive education coming out of a human rights paradigm. So in other words, education is a basic right. Our constitution states it, Salamanca, Dakar, every single conference that's been on inclusive education talks about education being a basic right. And the reason why inclusion came about was in the Nordic countries, where parents of disabled children were advocating for their children to be in schools, because we know between like the 1950s up until even the early 80s and 90s, most learners who had a disability were institutionalized. And they were just, the parents were told, get rid of your child, put your child in an institution and have another child, because your child's never going to be normal and they're never going to fit, or they're never going to conform. So there we go to deficit model way of thinking. And we don't think about the social model and Oliver's work in terms of people who are disabled still have a right. They are human beings. And I think this is something that we never, ever think of. And also, I know, Stacey, you've also had a bit of experience with public schooling as well. And Merit, you've had experience as well in your practice, and also of kids coming from public schools. Merit, I know you've done work in rural areas as well in terms of, working with communities. And also, I think something that we also have to understand that's also come up, which is so good in our chats, some of the students are saying, inclusion isn't only about disability, and that's something that we need to also move away from. Our lens has to shift. Inclusion is about, I'm including you and you're a vegetarian and you coming to dinner, and I'm ensuring that there's food on the table that you'll be able to eat. So I'm not going to serve you steak because I know that you don't eat meat. Inclusion is about including that child who needs to go to mosque on a Friday. So he may leave the classroom at 12 o'clock to go off to mosque and then we'll come back. Inclusion is about everything. It's about embracing, as you said, Stacey, in your quote about inviting somebody to the table. And I think that's something that we have to also consider. So any maybe let's look at the hopes now and look at some of the successes, and then let's get our students involved as well with some things as well. And yeah, if we have any questions, I'll check now in the Q&A as well to see if we have any there. So Stacey and Merit, if you just want to give us just give us one story or one little bit where there was hope.
So I'll just, before I maybe forget, sometimes when, parents, prospective parents hear about our school, whether it be on the website or word of mouth, they come to the school with an ideal, with a hope, with still believing that their child is academically able and they have the potential, which is great. And they come to our school, and our principal, Mrs. Caldera, she takes them around and she shows them the different streams and the different classrooms. And what sometimes parents say, maybe not out loud, maybe in conversation, they say, in one of the classrooms, the children look funny, they don't look like normal children, because, we have children who are Down syndrome, we have CP children, cerebral palsy children. And, they get a bit of a shock. I don't want my child to be in a school with funny looking children or with children who are not, looking the norm. And, we say to them, just, because we always have trial periods where a child can come and they can spend a week or a few days, and then we as a team, we meet and we discuss how the child, responded to the school and how we felt. And 99.9% of the times, the child does not want to leave our school after that trial period. They feel nurtured, they feel happy, they feel safe, they feel like they are empowered, they feel like they have a space where they can learn. And parents begin to shift. They themselves have a mind shift where it's not about my child being in a school where everybody doesn't look like a typical mainstream school. It's not what that's about. It's about including my child in a space where they are provided every opportunity and every learning support strategy that can be done to make my child feel happy. We have a very homely school. We are a family. So we provide that family love. And that's, I think, what it's about. So it's not about how they look, what race they are, what culture they are. It's about our family unit and making sure that everybody is included. We have Jewish children at our school. We have Muslim children at our school. We have Hindu, we have Chinese and all sorts. And every school event, we have to provide for the kosher children. We have to provide for the halal children and so on. So it's just about creating that space of our own normality. And also we try and teach our children tolerance. So if you do see a child who doesn't walk like you, or a child who doesn't look like you, we have those conversations with them. We don't package those conversations away and say, talk to your mom or your dad about it. We actually open that conversation with the children. They say, why I saw a child walking funny, or one of the children in our school has splints because he has CP. So we actually have those conversations with the children, and we explain that some children need glasses, some children need cochlear implants, some children need an FM system, which some children in our school wear. So it's all about also creating that conversation of tolerance, not only with the parents, but with the children as well.
Absolutely, Stacey, 100%. We're with you on the same page. I didn't clarify at the beginning of my talk, we are a mainstream school. We're an IEB school. Every one of my teachers are ordinary, amazing, highly qualified teachers. They're just like the majority of us on this webinar today. And for me, it's exactly as you've said, Stacey. It's building a rapport and a collaborative relationship with that child. It's getting to know that child, getting to know that child's sense of humor, the quirks, all those little things, letting the child experience a sense of belonging. And with what you role model in terms of the child being accepted and having a sense of belonging and the respect and the tolerance and all those words that you show towards the child, our children then follow suit. Our children also learn from children who are differently abled, because differently abled children are able to share what they embrace is their difference. Our school seems to take what a lot of the big mainstream schools will say, sorry, you're not one of us, you're not up to our academic standard, move along swiftly, you're going to impact on our matric results. This whole big wah about the end result of matric. And for me, it's not about that end result. We have the most incredible success rate. It's 16 years of 100% matric pass rate of children who everybody else has pushed aside. Children where other people have given up hope and said there's not a chance. They've 16 years of 100% IEB matric pass rate, because every child is given the opportunity and the guidance and the support, collaborating with the parents to work to what their best hope is for that particular child. Not every child is an A. For a child to get 50%, that's their A. Let's celebrate it. So it's accepting people for who they are, being respectful, giving children an opportunity for a sense of belonging, giving children an opportunity to learn from one another, teachers creating opportunities for tolerance and respect. Every child is unique. Every child has a strength. Every child brings their own to a schooling situation. So for me, Lauren, to choose out one incident or one child, for us, my biggest amazingness is where people have given up on children, we've had success. And it's time and time and time again that we stand and celebrate the successes that come out of our school. These kids can, and it's thank you to a dedicated teaching staff that doesn't have additional expertise. They're ordinary teachers. They are, yes, it's through their hard work, them engaging with me in a sense of belonging, them adopting the solution-focused philosophy in our school and working towards the child's strengths and the child's best hope and inviting the parents to go on this journey with us. That's what makes us successful.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, Lon, if I just might add something.
Sure. Yes, okay. Go for it.
So also just actually yesterday when I was at STADIO at Waterfall campus, myself and my other colleague were in the canteen and a learner jumped up and said, hello. She was a student at our school and she started her journey in the remedial stream. She was battling and went into the more vocational stream. With the love, with the support, with the care of all the teachers, she managed to go back to the remedial stream. She managed to matriculate, and she's now studying to become a teacher at STADIO. So it just shows you how, like Merit was saying, where you don't give up on any learner, whether they may battle in grade 1 and in grade 2 and in grade 3. You keep persevering, you keep providing them with that support, that love, and that care. That they one day, if they don't get to matric, it's okay. Some of our learners, like I said before, they leave with job employment. We have children who work at Moishi's Butchery, packing the shelves. We have children at Leroy Merlin. They actually leave with a job employment. They are working individuals in the field of work. And that's that measure of success. So it doesn't mean that because they didn't matriculate, they are not more successful than the student who matriculated is now studying to become a teacher. So it's just about looking at that child, looking at that profile and working with their ability and pushing them as far as they can.
Lauren, just quickly, I just saw in the chat somebody mentioned about a spelling test at 2 out of 10. Let's celebrate that too, because it's not naught. They've already got 2 right. Fantastic. Let's celebrate that too. It's not about the other 8 that still has to happen. They've accomplished 2. Let's try next time to get the 3rd one.
Yeah.
So 2's already amazing in comparison to naught. So it's celebrating the little baby steps in working towards what the child, what the teacher, and what the parents want to do as their best hopes for their child's education. Yes, parents sometimes are unrealistic and they need to be spoken, but they understand there are different techniques to work with parents in that regard. But celebrate each baby step that a child can accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely, Merit. And then I see Narishni, thank you, has joined us, one of our lecturers in the team. She's come onto the panel now, which is awesome. So I'll take your question now, Narishni, no problem. I just want to also say, Natanya, in the chat, you also mentioned something really, really important in that we sometimes, as adults, we play the adult power relationship and we assume, especially as teachers, we want to be in control. So we make the decisions, that whole notion of it's in the best interest of the child. We don't often consider and see the strengths of those children. And I have seen that in the work I've done in Katlehong, where those kids are more helpful and more supportive of those learners. They accept them more. Those learners that are maybe have a learning barrier. They are sometimes, kids can be cruel as well, I know, and we have bullying issues, but sometimes I think we tend to think as adults that we must make the decisions and that the children don't. And sometimes they are so supportive. And that's what Natanya mentioned there as well, of how in her environment, there's a kid who has Down syndrome and how amazing that learners have been within that context. So I think that's a very, very big one. And then another one Avi mentioned there as well, and I agree, that it's not about saying this is what I've got to do. Inclusion is like something that I've got a textbook now and I've got to follow. It's intrinsically within you as well. I've always say to the students as well, it's the advocacy and the agency that you show within that classroom. And as Merit said, it's that small difference that you make. That's why I have a problem with meritocracy in schools and prize givings and all these cum laudes and all this. What about that child who couldn't write? But 3 months down the line, that child is writing 2 sentences. That is worth a celebration. I'm not saying don't take the child who's written a brilliant essay and say, no, you can't get your distinction. But I think we also have to balance that scale in terms of ability. And we need to look at that individual child sometimes and say, you know what? Yes, well done on that 80%. You've written brilliantly. That's an excellent piece of work. But at the same time, we've also got to acknowledge that child who's written 2 lines, or that child who couldn't read for 3 months and now suddenly they're able to do word attack skills and they're able to read. And I think that's where we lose the plot in terms of the classroom. And also because many of you have also said in the chat, you're feeling overburdened, large classes, especially in public schools, teachers not getting enough support, not enough training, because, training is a problem as well. We don't have those professional learning communities. Somebody comes in, they train you, and then you've got to go out and implement it, and then things change. So I think it's all these complex issues that we have to think about as well. And just last thing before I let Narishni come in. So if we're looking at these aspects as well, just to go back to the literature people, we're looking at, this is a neoliberal way of thinking about education, where we commodify and we marketize education. So it's all about standards and it's all about reaching the right goals. And it's not thinking about what you and Stacey have in your schooling context, and also our students who are in schools who are teaching, and what are they experiencing? It's all about this, we've got to have standards, we've got to have the matric results thrown all over the newspapers in the top performing schools. But what about those kids that are silently excluded? And I think that's something that's so important. Have you ever seen a matric child? When they used to have the pictures, I know they've changed it now with Poppy. Have you ever seen in the newspaper a disabled child, or a child who, like you just mentioned, the student we have at Waterfall now, who was at your school and now they're doing teaching? That is something worth celebrating. But what does our society do? It's all about marketization and commodifying education. We've got to move away from these neoliberal thoughts and as Slee would say, domesticating education. We cannot domesticate education, because education is continually changing. Narishni, the floor is yours. And then Merit, we'll get back to you. Narishni?
Hi, Merit. Hi, Stacey. It's lovely to have you. I have 2 questions, and I'm just keen to know what your perspective is on these questions. So my first one is regarding competition. So we previously had a speaker who did a study on competition as a way of excluding learners. So I want to know, within your schools, is there initiatives to encourage competition, and how is this done? And what is your perspective in terms of that being a form of exclusion? That's one question. And then the other question is, as much as we can say, I'm just looking at this from the other end of the spectrum. We should help all learners reach their full potential, when it comes to inclusion. How do you handle learners that are just not making any progress. You know, not everybody is academically inclined, and we all have multiple intelligence. You know, I might be more logical or mathematical, and Stacey, you might be more kinesthetic, you know, for that matter. And let's face it, academically, we're not going to get doctors or teachers or whatever the case is, you know. So how do you handle learners in your classroom, especially with your initiatives to engage with their parents and really, like, obviously get it across to them that, you know, this, your child, or for that matter, this particular learner is not progressing or meeting the objectives? Like, how do you deal with those kind of sensitive matters? Because I know that could be quite disappointing for a parent to hear, but obviously it's a reality that you're going to get learners in your classroom that are not succeeding or not meeting the academic milestones. So I just wanted your view on that.
Okay, Narashni, sure, you're not working to my strength tonight. I have auditory processing difficulties because I can't remember one question after the next. Anyway, it's not my strength, but we'll work with it. As for competition, at my school, we have a solution-focused philosophy. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, and I'm probably going to come across as a bit of a hypocrite, but and I say that in that we are an IB school, so we're held by standards and what we have to accomplish by the end of the year, and what then has to be accomplished by the matric level when they write their matric IB sort of end of their 12 years. However, in our classroom situation with our philosophy and the different strategies, which is a whole nother lecture for another day, which is going to take quite a while to explain, the competition is not against others. The competition is what you as a child want to achieve realistically, and the teacher helps you collaboratively to work towards that. I don't like the word goal, because if you don't reach that goal, then you're a failure. I like to use the word either destination or a best hope. Our parents are brought in on that as well. And I mean, we buy in with the parents where we start with, what are your best hopes for your child? Yes, I want my child to be a straight A. That's fantastic. We would really love your child to be a straight A. But right now, we're not there yet. What do we need to put into place? What can we do more of? And this is our whole philosophy of breaking up, working towards a common destiny, a journey, a best hope together, one baby step at a time. So it takes out the competition that you, with the mark things, because I will lose my nut if a teacher calls out, the teacher has to, or the children have to call out their marks during the class time or anything like that. For me, it's not about the mark, it's about the comment, and it's about the effort, and it's about what you put in and how much you strived hard. So you might have got the most ridiculous poor marks, so what? But you managed to write or construct one good paragraph. Let's celebrate that. That's one step closer to your best hope. So that is our competitive edge. We also have what we call a star walk. So for whatever reason, a child is shining in whatever avenue, be it beautiful, shiny black school shoes for the first time this term, they get to go on the star walk to acknowledge, wow, you tried something differently. If the child's managed to write down homework for the whole week, they go on the star walk because, my goodness me, you've managed to actually write down your homework, and we try and reinforce all the positive behaviors. So it's not competition. It's trying to get away with, we have to have those marks at that point, at this kind of thing. Although, again, as that's why I said I'm being hypocritical, in that we're still held by what the IEB's expectations are and what we need to do. So we need to try and do differently. We try to put different strategies in place, and we try to collaborate, or we do collaborate with the parents and the child in working to what the collaborative best hope or journey is. And that's how we measure progress as well. In grade 1 or so, they might say to you, their best hope for this term is to learn to colour in the lines. I'm just using a very basic example. We teach them the idea of scaling. So where are you now? From 0, where you can't color in anything, to 10, where you are absolutely beautifully in the lines. Where do you think you are now? So the child will say, I'm at a 3 at this moment in time. And we'll say, wow, you're not at a 0 anymore. You've already got to a 3. What were you doing there? How did you manage to get to a 3? Going back to the child's strengths before and helping them tap those strengths to move forward. So that's how we deal with competition. But again, I want to say again, and some of my staff members who may be on the program today will hear me say, and some of my kids, if they said, that's a big word, because competition means different things to different people. It's like that word inclusion. What does competition mean for you within your context? Okay, what does progress mean for you within your context? Those are huge words. You need to define them and you need to break them down, not only from a school context, but for the individual child or the individual family.
Thank you so much for that. And I think, you've raised a very valid point that, competition means different things to different people. But from what I've gathered, I would think that it is a personal journey. We each have different milestones and different things we want to achieve. So I would obviously gather from your perspective that it is a personal journey.
So I'll just maybe add on in there. I definitely agree with Merit and concur with what she says. At our school as well, we look to the differing strengths of all the children. I mean, and it's not only academic. If a particular child has privately, done a horse riding competition and their strength is horse riding and they have just won a medal at a horse riding competition, at assembly, in one of the mornings, we will give the child that medal, and we will say that so-and-so was involved in a certain competition. Another little one of our learners has been invited to America to a dancing competition. So it's not only that we celebrate their academic strengths and their academic abilities, but we also look to their other strengths. And like Narashinaki was saying, we have different intelligences. A child may battle with reading, writing, and maths, but they're really good at dancing. They're really, really good at dancing, and they have succeeded in their dancing privately. And we celebrate that. And we say to everybody, look, in life, there are so many other things besides academics, and you can do so many things with your life besides only reaching matric. What we also do is, so we look at caps, and I know, Merit, you saying that your school is IEB. With our school, we have that fluidity where we have caps as our guidance, but we take core skills in that, and we water it down, and we look at reading, writing, and maths as our basic tools, and we use those as guiding tools for us as teachers, where we then teach to those core skills. If we look at some concepts and skills in the curriculum, and we ask ourselves those questions, do we find that valuable and necessary? Yes, I'm not saying, that these skills aren't valid, they are. But we look at these skills sometimes and we have to make a hard decision. And we say, we're not doing odd and even because, that's not really a necessary concept for what a child needs to know when they're out of school. But rather, can they write out their CV? Can they converse with you appropriately? Can they understand instructions? Can they respond to instructions? So we also look at competition very differently, where we look at functional skills. Are you able to be an appropriate human being? Are you able to fill someone else's bucket? We have a large thing at our school where we bucket fillers. So we fill each other with kindness, with hope, with love, because when you leave school, those are the kinds of qualities and traits that you need as a human being. It's not only, we don't only define our children by what they received in their cycle test or a spelling test. We actually look at other avenues. We look at other opportunities that the child has been engaged in, And we celebrate those opportunities as well. And then Arashni, just on your other point about different learning styles. And I know, when I was again at STADIO's campus yesterday, one of the students asked us, what happens in a big classroom with 40 or 50 or 60 learners where there are children who struggle? And what my colleague and I said to her was, sometimes it's not about having so much money as a teacher. It's not about as being, so high-tech savvy and having smart boards in your classroom and having the best equipment. It's about choosing small differentiated strategies, like differentiated worksheets, having workstations, targeting different senses in a lesson, peer sharing, buddy systems, using those tiny small changes within your classroom space that can make such a big difference, that then allows the kinesthetic learner jumping in a hula hoop if they're sorting out different nouns, or you're allowing a child to work in a worksheet and mind mapping a comprehension if they are a visual learner, or having a child listening to, a teacher talk on her cell phone. So it's about, again, trying to make those opportunities available for all learners. And it can be at a simple grassroots level. You don't need to have those smart boards and iPads and tablets. It's nice to have, but it's not always practical in our South African context. So again, it's making small changes in our classrooms, small changes that can make the big, big differences to our learners.
Thank you for that. And Narishni, thanks for that great question. I think it's such an important one to consider. I've just been running down the chat again as you were speaking, and I just found some very interesting comments also from our students in terms of, well, first of all, I just want to throw in something and say, I think when we're looking at ways of working with the learners in our classrooms and the context and everything, because it's not only about the classroom, inclusion is everywhere. I think we have to think about always being proactive rather than reactive. And I think that's something, especially with differentiation, if we don't work proactively, it's not going to work. If we just reactive, what we're doing is we're putting a plaster on that wound. And we're just saying, okay, we're going to fix it with a plaster. The wound's going to get better, but then it's going to fester again. So I think it's all about that. And in the chat, it was very interesting to see we've got many students who are teaching in high schools. Now, this is also such an interesting aspect, because when does childhood end? Often we have the perception that when the child reaches grade 7, boom, they go to high school, they're now adults and they're going to hit the adult world. But as adults, we also need acknowledgement and recognition. And I think that's where we lose a lot of the kids who already have barriers or have issues. And I'm not talking about just learning cognitive barriers. I'm talking about anything, be it cultural, religious, whatever it is. I think that's something we also need to consider. And as teachers, and one of you also mentioned in the chat, which is so important, is that teachers can often be a barrier. So what if that child gets a comment with a smiley face or whatever, and they're in grade 10, but they've actually written a good essay or they've really improved? We need to show via some kind of feedback as well. We all need acknowledgement. We all need a sense of belonging. We are human beings. And I think that's where we often lose it, because we put children into high school now and it's push, 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 push for the world of work. So again, we go back to like a sociological perspective, that we just preparing learners for the world of work. And if we look at our CAPS document, that's exactly what it says. And if we look at also in the IEB documentation, we want learners to be like, now we talk about 21st century skills. We want our learners to go out into the big wide world so they can find that job. But as Stacey, as you quite rightly mentioned, what about that kid who we know is maybe only going to be able to be packing something in a shop, but at least they're doing something, they're earning money? Why aren't we also looking at those aspects? And another thing that just came up from the chat as well is that we need to then think about things like a repertoire of strategies of how we work with the learners within our classrooms and the parents and all the stakeholders. And then also one sad case, and there have been many of those, one of the students also mentioned that a cousin of hers, because he wasn't making the grade where he was because of an impairment, straight away moved off to a special school. And I think sometimes that does happen. So Stacey, I'm not contesting what you do. The work that you do is valid and very real. But I think often what happens is because teachers are overburdened, they say, this is not my problem. the local special school down the corner can take that child. Or like Merit's had in her case, where she's had kids coming out of high school that have had drug problems and bullying problems and family problems, but Merit's taken them in, sometimes at a risk. But where are those spaces, and are we creating enough spaces, especially in the public domain? I think that's where the learners get lost as well. And there was some very excellent, thank you students, some really good comments about that, about you know, what happens in high schools and what happens in terms of that as well, because sometimes those learners, they just do drown, you know, and then it's only the successful learners that get to where they want to be. So that's great. And then Avi, I see your hand is up, and then we've got some students as well.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm just looking at some of the Q&As, so perhaps Stacey and Merit could address some of these issues. And just to remind students, we don't put you on the panel, so if you do have a question, please post it on the Q&A, and if you want to make a comment, post it on the chat. So I see Nathania posted quite an interesting example here of a student, a learner coming into the class, and I think, Merit, your example earlier on really pertains to this question of, you know, when is it that you want to be inclusive of one child, but in doing so, it might then be disruptive to the many. Taryn posts here, would it be considered exclusion if a normal school recommends an autistic child to a school that would be better able to accommodate him or her? And I guess that really speaks to working with parents, because like Stacey spoke before, you know, we also have to understand the hopes and the fears of the parents. It is not easy to make the decisions that need to be made, and we live in a society that does marginalize and stereotype, and so we also need to work with the best interests of the parents and not only the child, because at the end of the day, they also know socially and at home what might be, you know, best for their child. And then Warwick asks, if either of you have student teachers, then how do you assist them in understanding what and how one can be inclusive as an educator? So I think it's really important to also look in terms of teacher education programs, because I'm seeing a lot of comments from the students. We're aware, you know, of the difficulties, of the barriers, and not everybody goes to a school that has these types of resources, and many teachers are in schools where you are doing the best you can, but not everybody else in your school agrees with you. And so it's really demotivating to constantly have to be, you know, fighting for certain things. And so how do then, you know, in our student teacher programs and in professional capacity programs at schools, do we assist teachers to make that difference, even if it is small, or to, you know, to kind of embrace that kind of challenge that we know is happening? So those are the three questions at the moment on the Q&A. And students, if you do want to pose questions directly for the panel, please post them up on the Q&A, and we can still get to them before we close up. So thank you.
If I could be completely and utterly south-winged, not east or any of the others. For me, teacher training, I just need to say that teaching is the most profound profession ever. I have never yet met another profession in all my years of creativity on another level, okay? For me, it's not a textbook case. There's not one method suits all. Sorry, doesn't exist. I'm in the game 40 years. I've tried it all, okay? It's your creativity as teachers, your amazingness to create ways and find other things that you try and retry and rehash to try and reach your children. You are the inspiration. You are walking encyclopedias of creativeness. Please embrace that strength. It's a gift that you have. And that's why you are called a teacher. That's first and foremost for me. None of my staff are, well, there are one or two that are remediate trained, but what they come up with is the most incredible ideas that I have never yet found in an academic textbook. Teachers, you've got it. Use it. And for me, I hate the words that we band around as teachers. Things like the child is autistic. I hate that word. The child is dyslexic. The children at school come and say, well, I'm ADHD and I can't do it. And I say, so I've got hypocrocodilidacus, and that means what? Get over it. We need to teach the children strategies, other ways of getting over, under, around each side of what the perceived barrier is. Being ASD doesn't make you less. It gives you a label for what? You can still socialize, you can still think, you can still achieve to your own ability. Find ways to overcome those difficulties. Let's get rid of these stupid labels. Sorry, I know sometimes it helps. I'm assessing a little girl today that says, I'm here to see you, auntie, because I've got dyslexia. So I said, so what does dyslexia mean to you? I can't spell. Okay, so you can't spell. So what? So today we got spell check. So let's see how we can find another way to get you out of your teachers marking your spelling. I just hate the labels. Let's try and get rid of it. Let's just be mindful of the strengths of children and of others, not mindful of the negativity and the implications of what labels hold. Sorry, that's just my personal passion, and that's something that really gets to me.
I agree with you, Merit, absolutely. You know, in my class, so, you know, in our school, we have between, 8 to 12 children. Sometimes it's higher or less. And I look at my class, I look at my children in my classroom as no different to any other child or any other school. I've worked in 2 other schools prior to this one, and I see my 8 children as my 8 children, and I have an obligation, I have a responsibility to teach them. And I don't look at their learning difficulties as a hindrance or as a barrier between us. I treat them as my 7 children, and they are there to learn to the best of their ability. And like you're saying, it doesn't matter what label they have, they are there to learn. It is my job and it is my responsibility to provide those accommodations, to provide that support, to enable them to engage and interact in their learning space. And it is what you're saying, Merit. Teachers who love to teach inspire children to love to learn. And that's what it is. If you are showing your passion, if you are showing your commitment to enable them to embark on this learning journey, and a learning journey that's different to their neighbor, then they will become excited to learn. I always say in my teacher parent feedbacks at the end of each term, I always say, this term your child was happy. They were happy to come to school. They were happy to sit in my classroom, and they were happy to learn. I said, if I have a happy learner, then I have a child who wants to start learning. If that child does not want to be in my classroom, then that's a problem. It doesn't matter if they're struggling with maths, if they're struggling with reading or spelling. If they do not want to come to my classroom and sit in there for the whole day and want to learn, then that's a self-reflection that I've got to take, because I'm not providing that space where they want to come and to learn. It doesn't matter what problem they have. If they want to come to my classroom and learn, I have already won as a teacher, because I am providing that nurturing, I am providing that space where they feel happy, they feel noticed, and they feel supported.
Thank you very much. And I see, Lauren, that one more has popped up from Hannah. Thank you, Hannah, who asks, do you have any tips or ideas that we can include for lower income classrooms for learners who are unable to afford the OT and facilitators and so forth? So perhaps, as the conversation draws to a close, we could include at the end some tips, because I think it's also, I often, hear think that people misalign inclusion with resources, and this is why I kind of put out there, that perhaps we need to move away from inclusion is something you do and you need the resources and, the training and the support, rather than inclusion is who you are and how you're teaching. And sometimes, and I know, I think Merit has also mentioned this before, in some of the, and I don't like the word poor because I think it's relative, but in some of the most under-resourced schools that I've ever been to in marginalized communities, I have seen more inclusion practice or inclusion practice in more ways than I have in the most top-notch private schools. And so to me, I do understand the challenges, the infrastructure, systemic barriers that so many of our teachers and our learners are facing in an average classroom in this country. But I also want to encourage students to move away from that deficit view that inclusion is about resources. So I'm butting in here, Lauren. I see there are two more. There's another question from Bukelwa, just quickly, is that she's talking again about the rural areas where there are so many children in the classroom and the syllabus is, they're struggling. So again, and I think perhaps, the conversation right now speaks to that, Bukelwa, as well, is in terms of moving away from inclusion as resources. Yeah.
And I think Merit, you can add in there, because I know you've done work the last recent couple of months, you've done some work in rural areas, but also students, remember in our first live session, I said, look at the Young Voices Project. It is so true in my experience as well of working with learners who are in schools that are like farm schools and rural areas, etc. Let me tell you something, and that's exactly what Merit said in terms of creativity as well. Those teachers do a better job of including. And if we look at the older scholarship of inclusive education, you will see that the smaller the community, like the gypsies, the better inclusion is. Why? When that child has a problem, the whole family comes to the school and everybody gets involved. The whole community is involved. It's that Ubuntu. The whole community is involved in working with that child. Also, I have seen teachers take an old-fashioned cell phone, not even the smartphones, and test to see whether a learner can hear. I've had teachers use, for gross motor skills, use a stick and a ball. They didn't have to have a fancy OT equipment with a bouncy ball and a rope that hangs from the ceiling. And that is so true. And that's something that we need to understand. Even though our rural schools also, there are issues there, water issues, pit latrines, kids crossing rivers, and all those external systemic barriers that are out there. But it's about the teacher, and it's your agency, and it's what you do. And the smaller the community and the more impoverished the community, the better inclusiveness works. Why? Because it's a community. Merit, you want to come in there?
I just wanted to add, Lauren, for me, it's about collaboration. And when I say collaboration, the only reason I was gifted the opportunity to go into rural Eastern Cape recently and to do teacher training is through a principal in the farm school actually reaching out and saying, finding us on the internet, whatever, surfing around, and contacted me and said, would you be willing to come and do some teacher training for us? It's about collaboration. It's about finding other people who have the expertise that perhaps you feel you haven't mastered yet, and asking them, will they engage? A lot of the professionals will give it their time to give back to the community. It's about just going out there, networking, finding ways to get people who have the expertise to come in and to guide and to train the staff. It is possible, and I've just completed a project in this regard, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Can I just add in there, Lauren?
Yes.
So just on 2 points in terms of resources, and again, just going back to our presentation yesterday at Waterfall, it's, again, not about being tech savvy or having the best equipment. It's small changes that you can make. It's about putting children into groups. It's about having peer buddy systems. It's about having think, pair, share strategy between two children talking, together. Things that you don't need money for. You don't need resources for those implementation strategies. It's about making, we sometimes look too much at the big picture and look how much can we do and what resources and games can we provide. It's not always about that. It's about choosing those small differentiated strategies that we can implement that make the biggest differences. It really, really does. And then just, I think, to add on what Merit was saying about collaboration, I think it's also so important to invite those parents as well into the process. Like I know, at our school, we have an intake process where, the parent has to fill out a whole form, also listing their hopes and their dreams and their, and whatever. But they also, they come to the school and they are taken on a tour. So they come and they see how the classrooms are run. They actually walk into the classrooms. They may watch a few minutes, you know, they may watch the children, they may see what the teacher is doing. So they also kind of have a holistic perspective as to what the school is offering. You know, what are these classes called? Why are these children here? So they also kind of buy into the whole process. So it's also about collaboration with parents as well, because we need them very much in trying to take these children on their learning journeys.
Yeah, Stacey, I wanted to just add to that. I'm actually putting it in the chat that one thing we've missed out as well. We never listen to the voices of the children. We disregard that. And often I might be able to do a math sum. I'm assuming then that because I can do it in 3 steps, the learners must also learn it in 3 steps. That child might need to do that math sum in 5 steps. Who cares? They're coming to the right answer. And I think that's something we ignore the voices. And the voices of the children sometimes teach us as teachers. I've learned more from children as to how to do things and how to work with that, how to be more inclusive. Because sometimes, you know, again, this goes back to our Helen Turnbull TED Talk students, where she talks about our biases and our blind spots and our stereotypes. You know, when she gets on the aeroplane and there's a woman pilot and she makes a comment. We've got to move away from those compartmentalized ways of thinking. And we've got to think about those children have a voice as well. And when we act within the best needs of the child, are we acting in terms of social justice and human rights, or are we just making that decision? So that child must be just scooted off to a special school, or that child must be removed from their parents because their parents are going through a divorce. Do we ever actually talk to the child and say, where are you? What is happening? How can we help you? How can we include you? And that's what we've also got to get to. And also our teachers. Is there enough support for our teachers? Do you have colleagues that you can actually go to and say, I don't know what to do. I'm tearing my hair out. Merit's going to tear down the classroom now. I don't know what to do anymore. Please help me. Or do we have this hegemony? We've got these older teachers who say, oh, well, you know what? Doesn't matter. Goodbye. Let's just leave it and send the child to the next teacher. So lots of food for thought, people. Lots and lots of food for thought. We could go on for hours. Yeah.
Thanks, Lauren. And sadly, I see that our time is up, and that is the joy of these webinars, is that they do get all juicy sort of right at the end as we build up and get really passionate about the topic. But unfortunately, we do need to wrap this up and end the session. And so thank you to our panelists. I think the conversation was just so rich. And it's always wonderful to have the different perspectives and to have your wealth of knowledge and experience and all your personal examples and stories, I think add so much to the learning. To all the students and the staff members that have joined us, thank you again for your time. I hope this was an enriching experience for you. I hope that you have taken some amazing nuggets. I've been writing away all these lovely quotes that have been coming through. We do post the chat site, we do save it, and we post that up as well so that you can always go and have a look again at some of the comments that your fellow students made. So that that can help you again for the sessions. And I remind you that this is part of PTPE and part of HPSP. So remember that for the next learning events for both of those modules, you will be expected to have engaged with this and understand what's happening so that we can then have a conversation to link this to the content of the different modules. Nareshni, I thank you very much for joining us and for facilitating some of the conversation and always having some nice questions as well. To Delta in the background, thank you, Darren, very much for assisting. And of course, Lauren, thank you very much. You're always my go-to guru about inclusion. I could never hear enough about your experience and expertise. And I think the students are just so very lucky to have you as the module coordinator on these modules and in this program. And so, yeah, from me and from STADIO School of Education, thank you to everybody. And I bid you a wonderful evening. And we look forward to our conversation in the next webinar, which will be in April, looking at the Afrocentric worldview and how an African lens on education can shape and influence inclusive education in this country. So I'm really excited about that one too. Right, everyone, thank you so much. Have a lovely week. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks
all.